For a girl, her first best friend, her first role model, her first everything is her mother. And for the mother, her daughter is a reflection. With time, relationships may keep taking different turns, but the sentiments between a mother and her daughter remain unmatched. Above all, there's constant, unconditional love. Joining me on the line right now is Anisa Moosa, who is a social worker from Islamic Careline, to talk more about the mother and daughter relationships that we have and how we can improve them. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Anisa, shukran for joining me once again.
Walaikum salam to you, Sister Maryam. Thank you so much for having me on again. And just a few minutes ago, I was chuckling to myself because you spoke about let me go in to see what my daughter is throwing a tantrum about, and I
Mhm.
thought, what a great way to start the program.
And that's exactly what we're doing today, talking about mother and daughter relationships. And it starts from a very young age, like hers. And how do we mold them into becoming women? And we don't want them to become like us, but we want them to become themselves, but we still want to remain good role models for them as well. Okay, so why is a mother-daughter relationship so important?
Okay, I think for various reasons. The one is that women, mothers, are the first human contact and relationship that a child has when they enter this world. And interestingly, while you were chatting, I was thinking that, although we're focusing this program on mother-daughter relationships, but a girl's world of relationships is also partially influenced by how a mother raises her sons and how she
Mhm.
raises the two. So one is that yes, it's her first point of contact with human beings, but also with that's the one thing. The other thing is that they share gender. So her relationship with her mother will most likely influence her outlook on the relationships, on the different genders, on womanhood, on being female, whether in the home or in society at large. I think, like you said earlier, it's that first relationship, whether it be a friendship, whether it's a sister relationship, whether it's a mother-daughter relationship. It's a relationship on so many different levels. And also the mother being the primary caregiver, she would also instill values. There's a lot of similarities in the parenting, which essentially is a parental role as well. So you can have a lot of positives, but a lot of it also has to do with the parenting role that that mother plays.
hmm And when it comes to parenting, also, there are people who parent differently for whatever reasons. Now, when do relationships become toxic, like the mother-daughter relationships, especially? When do they become toxic, and what are some of those toxic relationships?
Okay, Sister Miriam, I remember there was another topic as well that we did, and I can't remember. I think it was in Salam Media as well. But it might have been Radio Islam also. But my point around that is more specifically around the word toxic. And I know
Yeah.
that people have become okay with using the word toxic. I personally tried to shun away from that word. It's a strong word. It's a harsh word. It's not uncommon though. Yes, we talk about relationships that are. We can talk about dysfunction. We can talk about unhealthy relationships as well. I think it also has to do with the severity
hmm
of the breakdown of that relationship, right? But I think if I had to think about the nature of a toxic relationship, it includes a relationship where there's no
hmm
boundaries, essentially. Okay, it's one where there's lots of hostility, lots of resentment, lots of negative emotion. It's an overwhelming relationship of negative. So it could be negative behavior, negative feelings, negative mindsets, negative outlooks. And I
Mhm.
think it's one way people become each other's like punching bag, excuse each other's victims and praise. So it's one that arouses a great deal of negative outcomes. It's not, uh, nothing about it is positive. It's a broken down relationship. And also, it affects each person in different ways, and you can start to see it in their behavior. There might be elements of abuse, most likely. An abusive relationship, whether it be emotionally, whether it be mentally, whether it be physically. So when we talk about toxic, it's usually something that should be thrown out in a way. It doesn't belong, it shouldn't be part of a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Or like the mother controlling her daughter, not giving her independence, or perhaps the mother being um, allowing the daughter to be too free, just do anything. You can do this because no, we're more like best friends and not mothers. But where are the boundaries there?
Right. So in either way, it could go, but it's a relationship based on extremity. So there's no, and when we talk about control, right? So you can hear control is not necessarily a bad thing. So when we talk about boundaries, we talk about control. So control, obviously, in an abusive relationship has a negative connotation. In a positive relationship, there could be a level of control. You can call it containment, you could call it setting the boundaries, appropriate boundaries. But also remember that with every relationship, we call healthy relationships associated with balance, which means
Mm-hmm.
that if I'm controlling, that doesn't necessarily remember that you mentioned the sister relationship or the friend relationship, but it's always important to remember that parents are not their children's friends and they're not their
Mm.
children's siblings either, because there's a responsibility that goes with that parental role that sets
Mm.
it aside from a relationship and a friendship. Yes, you can have elements or characteristics from those kind of relationships, and it's usually associated with saying, okay, we can enjoy leisure time together, or we have a trusting relationship where we can talk about anything and everything. But at the same time, the parental role has elements of being a source of guidance, and I think that it's that responsibility that sets it aside from everything else. And when you talk about why is a mother-daughter relationship so important, it's that for that very reason. If as a mother, your responsibility and role is to be a guide, a role model, then and as adults, a mother needs to check her actions and the messages that she's conveying, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Because remember, they say that children will learn not from just what you say, but also
Mhm.
from what you do. So if you're fulfilling a certain role, and again, if we talk about toxic relationships, if a mother is in an abusive relationship with a father or with a stepfather or in any relationship, the message also gets carried to a child. Is that acceptable? Or what is the message that the child is taking? So, again, we need to say that the way I love my life, what is that communicating to the child, because they're seeing certain things. So even your life choices, I mean, even take for example for a single mom, if it's a woman who's single and she's making certain life decisions, she doesn't have children, the implications are very different as opposed to a woman who's making decisions when she has children, because the kind of decisions that she makes, it may appear as though she's making her own life decisions. But how do those affect the child presently? So, what are the direct implications? But also, what are the messages about relationships going forward? And again, that also comes into the role as a parent.
Mhm. So how can we form these good relationships? How can we form a bond of understanding with boundaries, with respect, with an element of friendship with our daughters, without having to fall into these toxic traits that we don't want to have?
No, I think we mentioned a little bit earlier, relationships come very, very early in a child's life, right? And it's based, like you said, you spoke about respect. I think again we come down to communication, right? I think open communication, but also should be based on trust. So a daughter should be able to feel like she can trust her mom unconditionally and go to her when she needs her, right? And that also then has an overlapping with the communication. So just elaborating a little on that, right? So I think children also need to be taught that it's okay to talk about how you feel. As a mom, you need to be able to listen. And then whatever you doing, not just about the message that you communicate, but you're also teaching your daughter or your child skills. So when I listen to my child, or when I ask them for their opinion, I'm also teaching them communication skills. So they're learning that when I'm in a relationship or in any setting, whether it's work, whether it's um, even in an unfamiliar setting, the one thing that I do is that I listen to people and listen as in not listen to or do what they're doing, but I give them a hearing and I'm attentive because that's what I've been taught is the right thing to do. When you ask your child for feedback, you teach them that it's important to value people's opinion, right? So when we talk about being a role model, remember that those are the actions that you practice, and so you become a reflection of that, right? But with that
Mm.
also, it's okay to make the first move. We always have this thing that, oh, why must I do it if that person is not willing to do it? Right? It's okay sometimes to make the first move. If something is important to you, so if your relationship with your daughter is important, you're teaching her that it's important. You are important. And because you're important, I will take the initiative and I will try and see if we can work together. But also, and as I always say, all relationships are mutual responsibility. And because the program unfortunately is too short, but then you look at adult-child relationships. So, is my mother-daughter relationship with an adult child, or we looking at a relationship being built from the very very beginning? Okay, so they're also looking at the capacity of the child there. Okay, then, now obviously, when we talk about making first move with an adult child, then both needs to. But where does that come from? Right? Then we talk about changing yourself. Now, when I always talk about changing yourself, when we do counseling, we don't say you change the client because you're wrong. In most relationships, I think we need to bear this in mind. It's not necessarily about the right and wrong. Sometimes it's just about differences in opinion. And I think we
Mhm.
need to change that mindset about right and wrong. Because what we do is when we do right and wrong, we do blame and we do fault. And we do innocent and we do guilty. And I think we need to step away from that. It's about differences in perception, right? So it makes it less, it reduces the need for people to become defensive when we change that, the connotation of those. Okay. Then I think it's also about expectations. And I think it's natural for mums to have expectations of their daughters, whether it's my daughter needs to follow in my footsteps, and this is what I believe. Or
Mm.
and again, you see it in parents, not only moms, right? You'll see it in fathers as well. But staying with the topic, I think it's more so when it comes to women because you have a certain mindset about the specific role of a female, like I said, whether it's in the home or in society. And so you want to inculcate those same values. Yes, it's good to bring in good values to your child, but also I think it comes with um, that balance between listening to what the child needs, what the child
Mhm.
expects, what the child, even, one of the important things about all relationships is knowing the other person in a relationship. That's the best way to build a relationship. You build a relationship when you understand and you know the other person in that relationship. And when you open yourself up to getting to know your child for who they really are and understanding them. Because again, when we talk about parenting, not all your children are the same. You can have two
Mm.
or three daughters. And them might be different. And it's important not to compare them, but to get to know each one of them for who they really are, to respect their individuality, their uniqueness, what they
mm,
bring to you and to your life and to society, and to build on that, encourage them, empower them, um, feed into and nurture their strength, right? Be a guide, but not a control freak where you dictating to them what to do. Because again, the risk with parenting that, because I said not all your children are the same. You might have one of your children who you'd be able to ignite a sense of fear and they will comply, but your other child might be a rebel, and that is why it's so important to know your child for who they are, right? So we spoke
mhm,
a little bit about, uh, I just mentioned expectations, right? So what are your expectations from your child? What is your child's expectations from you? Realize that when children are very, very young, it's hard to communicate verbally with them. But as they
yeah,
get older, and the difference is that today's children are exposed to a lot more. Not just in society around technology and that, but even because of the increase in marital breakdown, in family breakdown, their emotional intellect is forced to develop quicker. They exposed to a lot more life experiences. So and children are more resilient. So it's okay to include them in discussions on their level to make them understand so that they develop well as they grow up. Um, okay, and then again, communication is highlighted to be able to listen. Okay, listening is so important in communication. So we talk about communication, but we also talk about the importance of listening. We often find that we talk a lot, but if we just stop for a while and listen, a simple thing I always say, moms, I realize they have a lot in plate. They sometimes multitasking, they're cooking, they're trying to do homework, they're trying to listen to their children, especially the children are small, they're running behind them, mommy, 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 I'm listening. Yes, I'm listening, but I'm just busy right now, I'm listening to you, but mommy, you're not listening to me. Okay, so they don't feel listened to because you're not giving them that undivided attention. And it's so important to take time out and sit and listen to them. It's important to listen to how they feel, right? Sometimes what happens as parents is that because we're uncomfortable with certain something, because it's a sensitive something, we shun away from it. But
mhm,
sometimes it's okay to allow yourself to exploit with your child and to run away from it, because then they don't know what to do with it. And then the risk with that is that they seek outside assistance with it, right? So again, not to impose things on your children, but to allow a discussion, to understand where it is they come from. And then if you feel like you need to steer in a certain direction, then you can do that, but you listen first and you know where it comes from, right? That's important. The other thing with that also
mhm,
is being able to, with expectations, is be able to accept your children for who they are, right? And
mhm,
that's important. You don't, again, it's not necessarily, you don't have to condone or accept negative behavior. We're saying that you need to accept your child for who they are, right? So again, there's a big difference. There's a difference between acceptance and approval. Okay,
yeah,
so you're accepting your child for who they are, and that's important because remember that whatever values, whatever you are with your child, they are going to then internalize it. So, like, let's say, for example, even body image. If I show my child that outward appearance is the most important thing, what does that child learn? And I'm not good enough because I don't look as good as. Okay, so I'm just giving you an example, right? Or
mm,
if I expect high performance at school and my child does their best, but they don't necessarily come out first, is that okay? It's okay because then the child learns to accept who they are, right?
mhm,
So again, the more acceptance you show of them, they become accepting of themselves, and that's important. Okay. Then, when something goes wrong, try to fix it as soon as possible. Because what happens in relationships is that you spoke about a toxic relationship, right? Toxic relationships become toxic because they left to fester in a way, right? They're not addressed. Help is not taught. It's not spoken about necessarily. It's not, attempts are not made to fix and change it. Okay. And sometimes what happens is in relationships, if you don't know any better, then how do you know it needs to change? Okay. Um, then always, we talk about empathy. And I know that in recent times people use the word empathy very, very loosely. It's about walking in the other person's shoes, it's about understanding. But do we really have the full capacity to be empathic, right? And this is what we talk about being able. So moms have been daughters before, okay? And tap into that space in terms of what is it that you would have liked as a daughter, whether you got it or you didn't get it. So we can always reflect on our relationships with our own parents and try to be empathic. Look, like I said, a lot has changed. Parents from a previous generation may not necessarily understand what it's like to be a child or a teenager, or even an adult, a young adult, in this particular given time, right? But I think it's important to always try to understand. And the only way you'll be able to do that is to listen. It goes back to communication and listening. Okay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to
Anisa, we're
forgive.
going to have to cut you off
We got
there
it.
just because time is not on our side. But we should have a part 2 of this topic, definitely. And we can rather discuss parent-child relationships. And we'll go for, like, yeah, for the full time. We'll make it 20 plus minutes, inshallah. But shukran so much for your time once again, and have a wonderful day. Assalamu alaikum.
Zakala to everybody. Walaikum salam, and have a splendid Women's Month as well for all you women out there. And for the men, why not? Okay, happy woman is a happy man, right? Okay, Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Alaikum salam. That was Anisa Moosa, a social worker from Islamic Careline, talking about mother-daughter relationships. And mothers, you need to accept that your daughters will not be like you. She may learn from you, but she will not be like you because she is a unique individual. She is her own person, and you just need to give her the space to be her own person, and you are your own person as well. Just be a good example for your daughter as well as for your sons. Do stay with us. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'll be chatting to Adila Pretorius.